Hi, my name's John Dooley. I'm with Microsoft. I'm a Dynamics ERP PTS on the US ERP SMB team. I want to spend a few minutes today talking about how partners can sell to our strengths in the Dynamics world, leveraging Azure and Office 365. And I built a tool that I call the Azure Modeler for Dynamics ERP, and it gives us a context around ERP business applications, workloads, and be able to position, on-premise, in the cloud, or combination of both. We have a real advantage, I think, today compared to some of our SaaS competitors, and I want to walk through how we might approach that from a selling perspective. I think we hear a lot about cloud these days, but I think actually what's most important probably is hybrid. Not everything's going to go to the cloud right away. Some people will want to keep some element on-prem, and that makes sense, and we actually want to sell to our strength on-prem. Some of our SaaS competitors actually can't support an on-prem environment, and we also want to be able to sell to our advantage in subscription and perpetual. I think if you look at the long-term cost impact of buying ERP forever, it gets expensive, and to me there's a bit of a kind of a lease versus buy discussion, and I want to help frame that up and be able to offer that. A lot of people want to look at subscription, but I think if they look at a lot of times these costs are costs, these investments are cost driven, and we really want to be able to call that out. We add a lot more value to the cloud beyond ERP and CRM. When we're up against just purely a ERP SaaS competitor, it's going to be apples to apples, and I really want to change that dialogue a little bit and really add in our total cloud opportunity and be able to position that in the whole consideration. If a prospect comes to us and they want to move some servers off-prem, right? They come in talking to us about ERP. We think that's great. We can support that. But also, chances are they want to move other workloads as well. And so we really want to bring out the options of moving a messaging platform, Exchange, put that in Office 365, and leverage all the things we have in Office 365. As well consider CRM Online and Office desktops. I mean, a lot of times this is a cost containment, and we really want to be able to lay out some options. And I think the total cost of ownership is a really powerful tool here. There's a bunch of moving parts that we need to kind of position and review, and there's a lot of options, and I think that's actually one of our differentiators to position those options. So we support cloud, we support on-prem, we support hybrid, we support ERP and CRM, and whole breadth of other options coming out of Office 365 and on Azure. So driving the cloud dialogue, with a customer or prospect, I think there's a kind of I want to be able to enable that. I work with partners all the time, and there's a lot to learn here, both in terms of selling and as well on the technical side. So what we've built is kind of a cockpit for modeling, Microsoft Cloud solutions, focused around Dynamics ERP and CRM. There's a lot of really great information on the Microsoft Azure site, but it doesn't really cover the ERP side. So what the goal is to try and merge that at a sales conversation that says, okay, great, we want to move to the cloud, we want to support you in Azure, and let's talk about ERP and CRM to go do that. So that kind of brings us into a workload-focused discussion, right? There's lots of things that go on inside an organization that finance and IT is trying to balance, what moves to the cloud, what stays on-prem, and how do we make all that work. And that's a perfect opportunity for us to speak to that and to lay out some options. A lot of the discussions I find start with cost containment. Do I buy a new server, or do I move it over to Azure? And the modeling tool covers the ability to model some of these things. I think that's what we see is people wanted to do a couple of different options and pick what's right. What combination moves to the cloud? What are the servers that we deploy? What's the Office 365 implication? And it really gets into a more strategic discussion. I think that's actually where we want to be more strategic. Sure, we can give you some options on the cost, but also what are you trying to do, and we can help you do that. You can kind of look at the business side of the conversation, alongside or eclipsing just purely the IT migration. So what we really want to do is just assemble, a couple of different options. We'll start, typically with ERP on the workloads, Some of those we need, like directory services, messaging. So let's actually extend that out, and so start with just one workload and then add in some of the other workloads. I think that what we're trying to do is to say, hey, let's look at what our options and push that all up. One of the things, within the tool, the partner owns the sizing. Sizing is relative to load, number of users, type of application. We don't know that. What we can do is help you if you know what you need to do to price that out and present some options. As well, you own the license, right? So there's license consideration on Azure for a VM, for SQL. Do you own ERP, CRM license? Is it, on-prem? Is it subscription? We just help you pull all that stuff together. What we will give you is an email template that you can modify, some TCO graphs, total cost of ownership, and then a topology map that just helps IT to think about where some things move up to the cloud. And then what we really want to do is options, get you some running totals of adding options or removing options, and what's the price delta for doing that. So when you think of selling Azure, a lot of times partners come and just look at the Azure component, and I think we immediately get into, well, what are you trying to do? And so what we really want to drill into that kind of tactical sales process. I think one thing is you need to understand what our options are. I mean, we do an end-to-end cloud solution, and that we support hybrid. I mean, I think the truth is hybrid is going to be here for a while. A lot of people want to move a couple of workloads, and they're going to keep some on-prem, and we want to be able to support that. We do offer more license options. It's clear. If you can buy perpetual and own it, and it's kind of the lease versus buy discussion. And then just talk about some of the cloud workloads. I mean, so there's a few high-level positioning things I think it's important for you to understand as a partner to be able to speak to and kind of lay out, the broader, more strategic discussion. Once you get an idea of, what we want to do, maybe we start on the ERP side. What do they have for existing on-prem workloads? Understand that all up. We're going to be talking to them about ERP or CRM. Get a user count in there, and then also get how many productivity users, Office would be out there, mail users or CRM users. We have some options on the client deployment side, on the ERP side. That's important to understand whether we're going to be deploying, a full desktop client or, a limited client or a web client, and we'll kind of support some sizing in the tool to help you do that. And then also just understand the existing cloud solutions that they have. So here's a link to actually download the modeling tool. Once you get into the tool, we just put in some numbers and start adding and turning things on and off, and sharing some of that out. So I think there's an iterative process. I tell partners to model high, and model low. What you find a lot of times is people will buy servers for 3 or 4 years out, and we will size Azure for the needs today, and then add more scale as the capacity demands grow. And so that's one of the advantages of selling Azure is we pay for what you need today rather than buying a machine for 4 years out. And then just position, right? I mean, start on the ERP side, speak to that. There's a few options that we have on the ERP side. Model high, is it? Model low, put a few things out there. And I think people like to have some options in there, and then begin to think about some of the other workloads that logically, come in. I think that we're in a unique way to position, a hybrid solution with a few other workloads than just purely our ERP, and we really want to speak to that. So at a high level, the modeling tool is you put in a number of users, right? I'm looking for 3 users of an ERP product, and you can select, GP, NAV, SLAX, or CRM. We can sell those, perpetual or subscription. There's some options on the SQL side where you may bring a SQL license with you. We probably need an Active Directory somewhere. So there's a few options. Dedicated, reporting server as a workload, remote desktop services, determining what we need from an Azure service level of agreement. And then some of the other cloud products that we may bring in, discussing that Office 365, which is an Exchange migration. There's a lot of interest in moving Exchange up into the cloud, leveraging CRM at least to address what some options are there. You have complete control of the Azure machine types and what the pricing that comes with that from the calculation engine. We also support multi-currency, and you can specify different regions that you want to do, and we'll put pricing from that. As well, obviously we want to be able to bring your services in, for implementation services, or you're selling the software if you're selling a perpetual, as well as finance options. And so what we'll do is we'll generate a worksheet, and this is a schedule of the virtual machines, and this is all as you make changes in here. We have a sizing fence that will adjust some of the machines, and you have the ability to review and change them based on what the needs are. And then we'll just create a quick mail, and the mail has got a bunch of different components in there. It starts out on the Azure side and then goes into your services, topology map, a map of what all the options we have, in cloud, private cloud. And then a TCO, this is kind of the backup data for the total cost of ownership, and then 5, 10, 15 year analysis of what the varied options are as we configure that on the fly. All right, let's look at the modeler. So go get it from my blog, aka.ms Captain Stack, and here we see version 3, and down the bottom there's a download link. So this is an Excel macro, and I'm going to save that in my documents folder. So I have created a folder here, Azure Modeler, and I'm going to save that. Let me go open the folder and then open up the modeler. I'm going to enable editing here. Okay, that just turns on a few of the macros that we have. It won't really work correctly without the macros turned on. So top level, a couple things. This link brings you over to the Azure pricing site, and that's important. There's a lot of good information on there, and we have the price calculator. So the modeler has the same pricing models that's on the calculator. What's different with the modeler is there's really, on the Azure site, there's no dynamics context. So what we try and do is bring the dynamics context to that. So let me go over to the modeler, and so you notice that here's the pricing that we bring over. So there's a price lookup sheet, and we have a couple of tiers, the basic and the standard tier, and then we have a couple of currencies. There is a getting started button. If you just hover over here, it will take you through some of the basics of the modeler. What the purpose of it is, that you own some of the sizing, you own the licensing. We can't do all of that. What we want to do is assemble that for you to make things easier. So let's actually just maybe walk through a quick example, and then we can drill into some of the details. There's a bunch of different options here. It's actually not as complicated as it looks. If you start with the Guide Me button, the Guide Me asks a few questions. How many ERP users are we looking at? What ERP system are we targeting? As well, I can support CRM in here. It's really agnostic on product. We have a sizing fence that this looks at. We ask a couple simple questions. How do you want to buy Dynamics? Do you own it today? So this works for a customer that wants to migrate, for a prospect that wants to buy a Dynamics license as well. So I'll say, no, I don't own that. This is some Office 365, and say, hey, I have Exchange on-prem. I don't need remote desktop. I have a mixture of Office users. I would consider buying subscription. And I don't own SQL today. There's an option to bring your own SQL with you if you own that. With software assurance, you get license mobility. So do the update. And what this will do is update some of the fields. So let's go through the modeler here. Anything in white, you can change the values on. So we start here. ERP users. How many users do we have? We support a couple different types of ERP users. If you have a web client user, we know that you get there's a load factor there. So typically we see some factor that says I can do web client users over desktop users and get performance in there. So if 50% basically says 2 for 1. We also have a limited client. The goal here is to just get a load of what we think is going to be on the machine. As well, we have the ability to override for Office 365 and CRM online users. So we come up with a base and say, okay, I got 3 users, but chances are I may want to deploy more than 3 ERP users to the organization. And then in the center is just a series of questions that you can set. Some have to do with ERP license here. So the guide me put in, hey, I want to buy subscriptions, blah. It actually also turned on a SQL machine. So we called out that we need a SQL, so this brought in a SQL web machine. You can override that if you want to by putting in SQL Standard or SQL Web. So, but then you see down here we've just got a kind of a call out of some of the machines that we set from the sizing fence. So it's gradient. The dark gray here is really the sizing fence, and you own the sizing, and that comes from the settings tab. So I can target different product platforms: GP, small, medium, large, XL, and SL, NAV, AX, and CRM. And the goal here is to get close enough, kind of horseshoes and hand grenades. I can set the number of users, so a small GP instance might be less than 3 users, so I have a range of 1 to 3. And do I need a dedicated SQL box in here? Your technical people would own the sizing here, for a reference for you. You have the ability to override, once you're actually into the modeler. So you can then target different platforms here. So right now we said GP. Let's change this to NAV, and we'll see that things will be updated for the sizing fence to support that. So that translates over, into here on the sizing of the machine. There's some formulas here that will do some lookup here. There's a formula that will look up from the sizing fence when that formula is in place. Then we have a couple of other options that you can set. Do you need a domain controller? Let's turn on the domain controller. Yep, we need a domain controller. That's going to add a second machine. That then creates a prospect worksheet. The worksheet is what we will share out with the prospect, so we'll get a schedule of some of the machines that we've spec'd out, some of the additional services, whether there's any additional partner services, and then a breakdown of what the costs are. So let's go actually just create a quick mail here. So we've got a model put together. It's going to ask me, do I want to export a template form? And so we have the ability to have you modify what the template is. So we're going to export this. So I'll say yes. This is a one-time operation, and that will go and put out a template form. Here you see that template form, and so we will access that template form when we create the mail. So now it says, okay, the title of my model, let's call this Model 1. And every time we create a model, it will also save that model. So when we create a mail, it saves the model. I'll hit OK here. And then this will generate a quick mail. So here we see we've applied the template. Just some wordsmithing here. You can control that. We've got a schedule of the Azure resources that we called out, the name of it. What the summaries of the Azure machines are, description, and then the monthly cost for that. We also have the ability to throttle the number of hours. We see some partners that want to maybe turn off, if you don't use the system 24/7, then you have the option of turning off some servers. So you can throttle that down. Right now we're calling for 24/7. And this will give you a breakdown of the additional services that were added in on the cloud side as well on your services side. So you have the ability to put an upfront cost in as well as a monthly cost. So then we give you some graphing that will show you the costs kind of year over year of comparing on-prem, Azure, and then a competitive SaaS offering that we can model in. And then we'll look at the topology, right? So we will automatically create a little topology map, and then we'll give you just a diagram of what the offering is on the Microsoft side of what the cloud options are. Then a TCO, and we'll break down, monthly costs on-premise, Azure, and then a SaaS compete. And you have the ability to include this or not, as well to override the values that are in the TCO. We find TCO is a good tool to actually help lay out some of the options. And then at the bottom we add in an analysis, a 15-year analysis, 5, 10, 15 years out. You just look at, it's a lot of people looking at cost-based understanding, and we can target, whether we want to be, what platform moves on-prem, and what the overall costs are. And so in this instance, we'd be looking at a competitive SaaS being expensive, and then we have more workloads. So you look at all the things that we add in on the workloads, at a comparative, if we're just ERP SaaS compete, we do more, and in this instance, we'd be doing more for less. And then at the bottom we have a couple of links that you can include in. We give you a few links and you can add some of your own links in there as well. Okay, so let's just make a couple changes here and say I'm going to add in CRM Online to that. Okay, so that's going to tell me that now I've gone red from the last model. I'll give you a running total of what the changes are. So this is helpful for turning options on and off. And so if for the 3 users over a 4-year period, it's $65 a user. We see that's green here. Anything in green is enabled. So let me go turn off a few things here. I'll turn off the Office 365. I'll turn off the CRM. So now we have a savings. This is green, so it's less money over 4 years. By turning the Office 365 off, we have a savings, green, a reduction, negative there, of $2,000. So if you look over in saved models, we save that model. And so here we see the details of that saved model. Now one of the things we find is it's helpful to be able to return back to a model. So I'm going to go call back a model in here, and I can say, well, let me go back to my 5-user model. And so that will come back in and say, okay, great, that's a delta. Here we have a savings from the 5-user model that we called out. And then anything in red here is a fixed point in time. At the time that we created the model, this was the machine and the quantity that we configured. We've overwritten the formula here, which is why it's in red, to tell you the formula is overwritten. If you want to leverage the sizing fence in some of the macros, then you can reset the macros to do that. That then turns off red. So now we'll see where now the sizing fence is taken over, or the sizing fence is here. So if I add in, let me go add in 15 users. Actually, let me put in, I want to turn on remote desktop here. So this will add in, you can control if you need to have a dedicated remote desktop server. So the green here indicates, hey, we have a remote desktop cal here, and you can get information by clicking on that. So there's a few links that bring you over, and here's some questions around the remote desktop services. Now if I increase the quantity here to say 15, then I'll add in another server. So I have a threshold that gets set. Over 10 users will call in a dedicated machine, and then you have the ability to override what that setting here is. So you'll see that we called for an A4 that has a lot of RAM on board. You can reduce that or increase that and make some changes in there. There's a 7 gig box that comes through, and that will reduce the cost. So you just have a few options. You have the ability to also change the quantities here. So let me put in my domain controller. So as we add in the domain controller, and then let me also add in the Azure Service Level Agreement. Add that in, and that will update the topology automatically. So now we'll see that we've added the failover machines in here, and we see the remote desktop, and we'll call out what the description on that is. Okay, so if I walk through some of the settings here, I want to go back to the settings tab. There's a few options that you can set. Really around what your name, obviously your name, put the partner name in here. If you want to create mail or not, that's an option to be prompted. You may just use it as a modeling tool. And then these ranges, so I have a prospect worksheet range to copy for the mail. So what this will do is take essentially a picture of the prospect worksheet in this range from cell B2 to G21. We will take a picture and we'll include that in. So there you'll see B2 to G21, and that's the range of the picture that gets included. So if you don't want to include that in there, you don't have to, right? If I don't want to include that, then we won't. If I don't want to, I can do the same thing with the TCO range. If I don't want to include the TCO, so if I go over to the TCO, this is quick look here. We'll model your on-prem costs, the Azure costs, or Microsoft Cloud, and then a SaaS compete. And so if we're competing against a SaaS ERP or CRM, then I can model that in here. So I have a base cost. What's the user cost? Average user cost. What are the fees to set that up? And then we can model that in on the TCO side and give you some analysis. So we break down services, software and services, and then environmental for the on-prem costs in here, and then monthly maintenance, and then admin and overhead. So if you want to include an admin discussion, hey, we think we can help you reallocate a couple of IT people, then you can turn that on. In this instance, it says we have 2 people supporting at a base salary. We think that we can reduce that by half a person to reallocate them. So if I look at the wage cost, then I can factor in the wage cost here. You may or may not want to include wage cost, because that can be sometimes relevant to relative to their desire on an analysis basis. Here's the Azure resources. So what we've done is we've assembled a few links that we think are interesting for you, the partner, as well as some links that you may share out. So we kind of classify them, and so we also have the ability to add them into a mail. So we have some case studies here. This is a GP case study. If I wanted to include that into the mail, just hit yes here. So you can add in some of your own case studies, some of your own information, and share that out. So now let's go and regenerate that. We've got a bit of a different model here. Create a new mail. Call this model 2. Okay, because this is our second model, it's going to prompt us to include a copy of the first model as an option. And this is an easy way to compare some of the different options we have in one mail. So I'll say yes here. And then that will generate a mail that includes the model 2. And then if I drag down the bottom here, we should see model 1. And then there's the model 1. So this just gives you the worksheet component, kind of to recap. All right, there are a few other things I want to just cover real quick on the partner side. So you can see here that we have obviously your services and your license. If they're going to buy perpetual, that we can put that in here. So you just turn that on, say okay, yes, I want to include that. That gets included in, and then you can override that and say okay, great, that's going to be $10,000 for service and for license. As well, there's a finance option. So I think one of the options that we have is to pay for this over a period of time, similar to what you would get with subscription, but there would be a 4-year lease agreement on that. So I can do the same thing, put in say $10,000 worth of partner services, and then turn on the leasing option, finance option, and then you can set the number of years for that, and then just some basic. It's not a financing tool. It's really just to put the cash flow component in place. And so in this model, under 2 years, the first 2 years would be $7,200 to pay for that, and then the remaining years would be 1607. A couple other quick things to close up on here. Prices do change, so I do want to cover a little bit of the fine print here. You own the pricing. You can change your pricing if you have an EA. You want to set your own pricing, you can do that in the tool, and you can do that on the pricing tab. There is an option to update the pricing as we add machines and the prices change. Then we will update that on a spreadsheet. So we have a little link over here to a OneDrive account. So here you see the Azure price update sheet. This points to an update sheet on my OneDrive account, and I'll just include that in. So if I just hit the update Azure rates, this will go through and clear out the existing rates, go query the drive, and then pull those rates back in. So this just makes things easier. Obviously the rates do change somewhat, and that's important to make sure that you're reflecting the current rates. As well, we have the same kind of thing on the Azure resources. So if you go back over to the settings, you can see the Azure resource, and we've got a link over there. So go back to the Azure resources and update it. Now, if you put any links in this for yourself, we will step on them, just so you know. So you might want to archive them If I update this, that will go through and then I pull a new set of resources in again from that OneDrive. All right, well, thanks. There's a bunch of options within the tool, and really the goal of the tool is to enable a dialogue and presentation of what we have for Microsoft Cloud, Azure, Office 365, and then really meeting what the prospect or customer's needs are, both in the on-premise and cloud in the hybrid world. So thanks for your time.